Chapter 1. Crown Princess Solveig discovered her engagement in Article 42 of a maritime treaty. She was halfway through the final annex when the words appeared beneath a heading called Symbolic GUAATs. To affirm the permanent union of Norwin and Belerive in stewardship of the Albion Isles, their Royal Highnesses Crown Princess Solveig Ingridson and Crown Prince Matteo Dorenza shall announce their intention to marry within 30 days of ratification. Solveig read the sentence again. Waited around the treaty table in Belerive's hall of maps. Beyond the tall windows, rain blurred the harbor where both nations' flags snapped above the Stormerlee fleet. Cameras would enter in 8 minutes to record the signing. Said, Norwin's Prime Minister Erik Voss did not look up. The language was approved last night. Not by me. Across the table, Crown Prince Matteo stopped turning his pen. He had arrived 20 minutes late, apologized to the interpreters before the ministers, and spent the meeting drawing small boats in the margins. Now he found Article 42. How efficient, he said. Our governments have removed courtship from the schedule. Belerive's chancellor leaned forward. The article records an intention, not a legal obligation. Either household may decline. After ratification, Solveig said, meaning refusal would appear to collapse the treaty. Nobody contradicted her. The Albion Isles lay between the two countries, home to 80,000 people and an argument 3 centuries old. Cyclone had destroyed ports, hospitals, and the freshwater plant. Norwin supplied engineering and energy. Belerive supplied shipping and finance. The treaty created a joint reconstruction authority and ended competing sovereignty claims. Bond funds remained trapped behind lawsuits. Prime Minister Voss folded his hands. Public support is fragile. A dynastic union would reassure both electorates that stewardship will outlast governments. Marriages outlast governments, Matteo asked. Has anyone informed the divorce courts? The Chancellor's mouth tightened. Your Highnesses have appeared together favorably before. Solveig remembered 3 state dinners and 1 regatta at which Matteo had jumped from a royal launch to rescue a waiter's hat. Favorable was a creative description. You built a public treaty on a private decision you did not request, she said. We are requesting it now, Voss replied. The cameras enter in 6 minutes. Matteo pushed back his chair. Then they can film me leaving. If she walked out, Norwin's opposition would say she valued autonomy over flooded island families. Her mother, Queen Ingrid, was recovering from a stroke, the palace still described as exhaustion, to become regent in every way except name. The Prime Minister knew precisely which duty to place against her throat. She closed the annex. Give us the room. The ministers objected. Matteo opened the door himself. Rank, Solveig observed, remained useful for evictions. They were alone beneath a painted map of Europe. Matteo poured 2 glasses of water. I will refuse, he said, publicly. I will make clear the reconstruction clauses should proceed without us. Solveig opened the cabinet copy of the negotiating history. Had first appeared at 2:13 that morning after both royal legal teams left. It carried initials from Voss and Belerive's chancellor, but none from the island delegation. They did not consult Albion representatives either, she said. Feel grateful that our hypothetical children solved their pipes. Matteo called Iona Bell, chair of the Provisional Island Council, on speaker. Iona answered from a relief warehouse where forklifts beeped behind her. She had not seen the clause. Silence lasted 3 seconds. If either of you proposes during my water meeting, Iona said, I will throw the ring into the desalination intake. That seems clear, Matteo replied. Sign the reconstruction framework. Remove the marriage. Give the islands elected oversight. Instead of 2 palace appointments, your private lives are not a seawall. The call ended because a shipment of filters had arrived. Solveig looked across at Matteo. The island chair had named the moral fact more efficiently than either heir. We cannot remove it without reopening the annex, Solveig said. The ministers will delay the entire signing. Then we announce the clause and our refusal now. That turns families without water into the backdrop of our independence. They stood on opposite sides of the same trap. For the first time, Mateo's irritation was not directed at her. It was shared, and sharing it felt more intimate than courtesy. Your parliament may not ratify after that. Then my parliament can explain why romance is load-bearing infrastructure. Salvi walked to the window. On the quay, island families held signs demanding clean water before flags. How long would you be willing to pretend? The room became quiet. Mateo set down his glass. That question should offend me. It offends me. I am still asking. They had met often enough for her to know he disliked. Ceremonies loved sailing and used humor when trapped. He knew she read every page, never danced before midnight, and had ended a 5-year relationship without public explanation. Neither knew enough to marry. Months during ratification and the first reconstruction phase. No wedding date. Either of us can end it without claiming fault. And when the public learns it was theater, we tell them it failed. Mateo walked the length of the painted coast on the wall. No, if we do this, we do. Not call it false. We agree to explore a real relationship for 6 months. We may fail, but we do not rehearse feelings for markets. Solveig disliked the distinction because it demanded more than performance. You expect us apt, not to manufacture gestures we would reject in private. The announcement itself is manufactured. So are most dinners. People may still eat honestly. He proposed conditions aloud while she wrote them in the treaty margin. Equal control of appearances. Independent advice. The island authorities' elected oversight would be introduced during the first review, whether ministers liked it or not. When either of us wants to stop, we tell the other before an advisor. Solveig underlined it. She had ended her previous relationship through a conversation shaped for months by people who were not in it. Agreed, Mateo studied her. You are prepared to make yourself the cold northern princess who could not love me. My national self-esteem may not. The cameras were due in 2 minutes. He held out his hand. We write our own terms first. Solveig took it. His palm was warm, his expression no longer amused. When the ministers returned, the 2 heirs were seated side by side with Article 42 crossed out in red. We will sign the treaty, Solveig said. The engagement, if it occurs, will belong to us. Chapter 2, Mateo had negotiated shipping accords with pirates who wore better suits than ministers. None had demanded that he discuss bedrooms before. Breakfast, Solveig's proposed engagement contract lay across the library table at San Aurelio Palace. It covered public appearances, residence, finances, security, press access, medical privacy, political neutrality. Clause 9 stated that neither party would imply sexual intimacy for publicity. Clause 10 stated that no intimacy was expected. Comforting, Mateo said. I feared desire might become mandatory on alternate Tuesdays. The corner of her mouth betrayed her. His own additions were less elegant. Separate households, no surprise events, no staged kisses, no questions about children. Either could veto a photograph taken in private space. He added one clause requiring dinner alone. Once a week without staff. Why? Solveig asked. If we cannot endure a meal, the cameras will know before the soup. We could rehearse, that is what the meal is. She accepted after changing dinner to 90 minutes maximum. The announcement took place in the palace courtyard. Mateo's mother gave Solveig a sapphire ring that had belonged to no famous ancestor. By agreement, it fit because 3 jewelers had measured Solveig's gloves during treaty week without telling her why. Finger. You should see what they can learn from shoes. They did not kiss. He touched his forehead to hers, an old Bellarivan greeting intimate enough for photographs and true enough not to feel stolen. The crowd beyond the gates roared. Reconstruction bonds sold out, and commentators discussed Solveig's coat. The Albion Treaty passed Bellarive's lower chamber by 9 votes. Physical contact to be mutually approved became an international joke. No succession commitment. triggered a constitutional debate about children neither of them had planned, a Belarivan columnist called Solvig the ice auditor, Matteo as a decorative opportunist. At their first weekly dinner, they sat in a private salon between untouched plates of sea bass. "Your government leaked it," Matteo said. "Your chancellor benefits more. Belarive votes tomorrow. A scandal does not help ratification," threatened Romance might. "Your opposition is already warning that Norwin insulted you." He poured wine, though Clause 14 limited them to 1 glass at official meals. "You suspect everyone with admirable fairness. That is how trust begins. In Norwin, perhaps." There, phones vibrated simultaneously. A survey showed support for the treaty had increased. Sympathy for Matteo rose in Belarive. Concern for Solveig's dignity rose in Norwin. The leak was working exad. Solveig looked toward. The door's staff waited beyond them, along with 2 nations eager to interpret any expression. "If we end it tonight, the treaty vote may fail. And if we continue, whoever leaked this controls the temperature." He expected her to calculate, and placed it on the table. "Ask me," she said. "What? Whether I want to continue, not whether Norwin does." Matteo felt the anger beneath her composure. It was not coldness, it was heat under pressure. "Solveig, do you want to remain engaged to me while we find who used our private terms?" She considered him rather than the treaty. "Yes, do you? Against my better judgment. That is not an answer." He smiled despite himself. "Yes." She held out her hand. Matteo replaced the ring, more carefully than he had in the courtyard. Remaining 81 minutes, listing everyone who possessed the draft. The list led them into the mechanics of each other's households. Norwin documents traveled through a numbered cabinet system. Belarive relied on encrypted tablets, and a clerk named Paolo remembered every password but refused to write them down. Solveig's chief of staff believed leaks came from ambition. Matteo's believed they came from boredom. They compared the draft comments line by line. The version online omitted Matteo's proposal for weekly dinners and retained Solveig's harshest early wording. Someone wanted him to appear vulnerable in her calculating. "Do you resent me?" she asked. "For Clause 10, for being useful as the woman who rejects you." Matteo considered longer. "Because you wrote it. Because people already believe any woman beside me will eventually discover I am not serious." "Are you?" "I have been serious about avoiding seriousness." He told her about an actress he had dated for 18 months while insisting to the palace it was casual. When the press found them, he let advisors call her a friend rather than challenge the lie. She ended it the next day. "I thought I was protecting her," he said. "Mostly I was protecting the version of myself who could leave without consequence." Ring around her finger. "Then our enemies selected their story well. They usually do. It only has to resemble the wound." For the remaining minutes, they stopped investigating and ate lemon cake from the serving trolley. Chapter 3. Their first tour of the Albion Isles began in a storm. Solveig preferred it. Rain left no room for ceremonial unreality. On Merrow Island, she and Matteo put on municipal waterproofs and inspected the half-built desalination plant with engineers who cared little about sapphires. The cyclone had driven salt water into wells, forcing villages to import drinking water by tanker. At the plant, Island Council Chair Iona Bell refused to stand beneath the royal press canopy. "Passion for llamas," she said. "Our pipe contract still needs signing." Solveig liked her immediately. The missing signature belonged to the joint authority, whose Norwin and Belarivan directors disagreed about procurement rules. Institution without deciding whose bureaucracy it inherited. While ministers celebrated unity, pumps waited in customs warehouses. Solveig asked to see the warehouse. An advisor said the schedule allowed 20 minutes. Filters sat behind a red customs line because Belarive classified them as industrial liais. Each category required a different inspection certificate. The officials on duty had exchanged 12 emails, never spoken. Matteo moved a folding table onto the painted line and sat the 2 inspectors opposite each other. Solvig brought the directors, engineers, and a customs lawyer. They traced responsibility until it disappeared into an annex nobody had translated. "Who is harmed if you recognize both certificates for this shipment?" Solvig asked. The Norwin inspector admitted no one. The Belarivan worried about precedent, then write the precedent narrowly, Matteo said. Isles, pending elected authority review. By noon, the first truck left. A group of local school children applauded because their teacher told them the filters meant taps might reopen. Solveig felt embarrassed by the applause. Only making people occupy the same room. Power often advertised itself as vision when its real advantage was the ability to schedule attendance. Matteo called both directors into the site office. Solveig expected him to charm them. Engineer to explain what each day of delay cost. Children at 2 schools were already restricted to 4 liters of water. A care home had postponed dialysis services. Charm arrived later, and the return drive, Their convoy stopped between the sea cliff and a line of abandoned cottages. Security wanted to reverse 30 kilometers. Iona offered the old fisherman's hostel for the night. The hostel had 8 rooms, unreliable heating, and no suffiti suitable for dynastic symbolism. Solveig's staff occupied one wing, Matteo's occupied the other. The heirs received adjoining rooms with a shared bathroom and a bolt that did not work. Clause 7, Solveig said, testing it. The door has not read the contract. Their weekly dinner became lentil stew at a wooden table with Iona, 2 engineers, 4 security officers, and a fisherman who asked whether royal children would belong to both countries on alternating weekends. Attitude, the fisherman replied. Matteo choked on bread. Afterward, the power failed. Staff found lamps, rain struck the roof, and someone produced a battered deck of cards. Solveig had not played in years. In Belarivan, Iona accused both of being bad losers. The fisherman, Enzo, dealt a game called Widow's Harbor. Every player began with 2 hidden cards and 1 public debt. Matteo improvised a deck, then lost. Because Iona changed the value of queens under an island rule nobody had mentioned, "This is corruption," Solveig said. "This is local sovereignty," Iona replied. Even Solveig's protection chief laughed. The sound altered the room. Royals argued over cards and passed bowls of salted almonds. Matteo washed cups when the hostel keeper began clearing. No photographer captured him, no one praised his humility. From the village arrived with her father to bring extra blankets. She asked whether Solveig's ring meant the islands now belonged to both of them. Solveig knelt so they were eye level. "The islands belong to the people who live here," she said. Adults are still working out. The girl accepted this and asked if the sapphire was real. Matteo said it was real but not magical. Solveig found herself hoping he was wrong about the second part. For 3 hours, nobody photographed them. Covered porch watching waves break white against the harbor wall. Matteo joined her with 2 blankets. "You were different today," she said, wet, useful. High praise from the ice auditor. She winced. "I am sorry. Like an inspection my former partner said, I approached love as a system that failed if I could not predict every demand." Matteo leaned on the rail. Why did it end? He wanted a private life. I kept promising the next year would be easier. Then Caspar of Varennes died, my mother. Became ill, and I knew easier was a word heirs used to postpone honesty. "Did you love him?" "Yes." She did not decorate the answer. It was still right to leave. Matteo watched the dark sea. "I have never remained long enough to be left. That is my system." She turned toward him. "Efficient. Thank you." The porch lamp flickered back to life. They stood close beneath one blanket, rain trapping them in a temporary world. "Clause 9, Solveig said. "No staged kisses. There are no cameras." That sounds like legal advice. An amendment. Matteo's surprise lasted a breath. Then his hand settled at her waist, warm through the borrowed waterproof. The kiss deepened without hurry. There was salt on his mouth and laughter he had not quite lost. I request a second reading. The hostel door opened. Iona looked at them, took one step backward, and closed it again. Chapter 4. The photograph appeared the next morning. It showed Solveig and Matteo beneath the porch blanket, faces close before the kiss. Blocked road with a long lens, it turned an unguarded minute into proof of either passion or manipulation, depending on the newspaper. Security found tire tracks above the landslide. The photographer had known the route would close before the royal convoy did. Troubling. The image arrived with another page from their contract, the clause allowing either party to end the engagement after 6 months. Only 6 people held the complete early draft. Solveig said during the emergency call, 2 lawyers from each country, minister and the chancellor. Matteo paced the hostel's map room. My lawyer's copy had blue comments. The leak shows green. Green belonged to Norwin's cabinet office. Prime Minister Voss denied involvement and suggested a junior clerk. Solveig requested the access log. Invoked national security, the phrase answered enough. She flew to Norwin that afternoon and confronted him in the Regency office. Queen Ingrid's portrait watched from above the fireplace, painted before illness softened one side of her face. Solveig visited her mother in the private apartments. Ingrid was walking between parallel rails with a physiotherapist, dragging her left foot and cursing in 3 languages. Solveig waited until the session ended, then described the leaked contract. Listened from an armchair, her once effortless face requiring visible work for every expression. Voss believes stability is kindness, she said. Did you authorize him to use me? Ingrid looked toward the frost-whitened garden. Perhaps. The answer hurt, but it did not hide. Your father and I announced our engagement before we knew whether we could live together, the Queen continued. We became lucky, and called the method wise. You loved him. Yes, luck again. Solveig had grown up hearing their marriage. Offered as proof that royal duty and private happiness naturally converged. Her mother's revision felt like discovering a door behind a tapestry. Do not protect me from Voss, Solveig said. Difficult left hand and covered Solveig's. Agreed. Voss did not deny authorizing the first leak. The treaty would have failed in Belarive. Public sympathy changed the vote. You used my private terms. The crown is not private in matters of succession. My consent is. He stood. Your mother understood that sacrifice is not requested politely. Solveig felt the room narrow. Voss had served her mother for 15 years. He had visited the hospital, brought state papers, and taught Solveig which silences in cabinet meant danger. Still wanted his approval. Did you arrange the photographer on Marrow? No. She believed the distinction and not the innocence. The initial leak had invited other actors to turn intimacy into policy. Voss warned that dismissing him during ratification would create a government crisis. Solveig reminded him that only Parliament could dismiss a prime minister, and that Parliament's ethics committee would receive the access log before evening. You would damage your mother's government for a 6-month engagement. I would protect the government from believing good outcomes erase unlawful methods. Voss's coalition ordered an inquiry. He stepped aside pending review. Treaty support fell in Norwin for the first time. Solveig faced the press alone on the palace steps. Advisors offered phrases about procedural concerns and regrettable disclosure. She rejected them. She explained that her office had entered the engagement voluntarily after ministers created improper pressure, and that continuing it did not excuse the leak. Minister Voss coerced you? A reporter asked. The legal answer was no. The honest answer required more room. He placed a public consequence beside a private choice and relied on my sense of duty to close the distance, she said. Not make his method acceptable. Another reporter asked whether citizens should pity a princess with constitutional lawyers. Solveig said no. People faced versions of the same pressure in families, workplaces, and marriages without her protections. Not that she had suffered most. The point was that power should not rename pressure as service. The clip divided the country. It also brought hundreds of letters from people who recognized the distinction. Solveig read several before Matteo arrived. Private language could become public without ceasing to belong to the person who spoke it. For once, she let those letters answer nothing, while allowing every voice to matter still. Matteo arrived at the Regency Palace after midnight. Solveig found him in the winter gallery, studying portraits of her ancestors looking variously victorious and constipated. "You did not have to come," she said. That sentence rarely means what it says. He had faced his own parliament that evening. Monarchy was incompatible with privacy and democratic accountability. Matteo agreed with part of their argument, which irritated everyone. "The Chancellor wants us to set a wedding date," he said. "A real date would demonstrate the engagement survived manipulation." "No, I said the same with more hand movement." Solveig removed the sapphire ring. Matteo's face stilled. "I cannot tell whether I want this or whether every crisis makes stopping feel like surrender," she said. "The kiss. I wanted that. Good. I have limited expertise, but I suspected." She placed the ring on a marble table. "I need 1 week without performances. The contract permits 48 hours. "I am invoking sovereign weather." Matteo did not put the ring back on her. He closed her fingers around it. 1 week, he said. "No joint events, no. Strategic longing. If you call, I answer as myself." At the gallery door, he paused. "For the record, I want more than 6 months. I do not require you to want it tonight." He left before she could use gratitude as an answer. Third morning, an earthquake damaged the southern Albion Causeway. No one died, but the temporary water line to Merrow ruptured. Bellarivan ships carried replacement pipe. Norwin engineers had authority to install it. The joint directors began arguing before the Pandit. First vessel left harbor. Solveig called Iona, not Matteo. "Bring both of them here," the council chair said, "and leave your jewelry at home." By sunset, Solveig stood on the causeway in a hard hat while waves broke over damaged concrete. Carrying procurement waivers signed by Bellariv's parliament, he greeted her with a nod suitable for ambassadors. They worked for 14 hours. Matteo spent 6 of those hours on the deck of the Coast Guard cutter. Pipe sections had to be lifted by crane in rough water. Every time the hull rolled, the suspended steel swung above the workers. Solveig watched from the command shelter, unable to order him below without repeating the very ownership they had rejected. Slipped. Matteo was not heroic. He froze. A deck officer pulled him behind the safety rail while the pipe struck the hull. Nobody was injured, but Matteo's hands shook so badly he could not fasten his life vest. Solveig helped with the buckle after asking, "Prince," he said automatically, borrowing Adrian of Ladavia's childhood story from a council dinner. She waited. "My father drowned while sailing," he admitted. The report called it sudden weather. He ignored a harbor closure because the anniversary race mattered to him. "You still sail. I keep trying to turn fear into competence." "Does it work?" "Until a pipe swings." She stayed beside him until his breathing slowed. Then he returned to the deck, not to prove courage, but because the officer found him a task away from the crane. The pipe coupling, ordered under Norwin specifications, did not fit the Bellarivan flange. Engineers proposed waiting 2 days for an adapter. A local welder named Sana built one from the metal ring of a decommissioned buoy. Secured liability coverage. At 3 in the morning, water reached Merrow's reservoir. Island residents applauded Sana, which was correct. Solveig and Matteo sat on the causeway wall, eating emergency chocolate. Matteo unwrapped another square. "This violates the no strategic longing provision." "It is not strategic." "Then I missed you, too." The answer made her more frightened than the Prime Minister's betrayal. Private attachment would remain after the flags came down. "I do not want our marriage to be the treaty," she said. "Neither do I." "I may not want marriage at all." He absorbed that. "Yes. Then we begin there." They returned to the island, council office, and drafted a new proposal. The symbolic guarantee article would be removed permanently. The joint authority would answer to an elected Albion assembly. Not either crown reconstruction bonds would be secured by both parliaments. Would have no legal connection to ratification. Drafting lasted through sunrise. Iona rejected language stating that Norwin and Belarive granted authority to the islands. Distraction. Solveig changed granted to acknowledged. Matteo removed a clause allowing either national cabinet to suspend island decisions during fiscal emergencies. The Treasury officials protested by video call. Received 6 incompatible answers. At 8, local council members arrived in work clothes and read every page. A nurse questioned health representation. A fisherman demanded protection for seasonal workers. Climate targets could be enforced rather than celebrated. The proposal grew less elegant and more legitimate. Solveig thought of the marriage article appearing at 2 in the morning after relevant people had left. Process was not decoration around a good decision. It was how one discovered whom the decision had forgotten. The plan threatened ministers who had spent months selling royal romance as constitutional glue. It delighted Iona. Before presenting it, Solveig called Queen Ingrid. Her mother had regained speech slowly after the stroke and preferred direct questions because long diplomatic sentences exhausted her. "Did you know Voss would leak the contract?" Solveig asked. "No." The Queen's voice was rough. "I taught him results mattered too much. I wanted you." "Not alone. Those are not the same. I know now." The admission crossed years between them. Ingrid had married for affection and then allowed duty to consume the language of it. Solveig remembered her parents sitting at opposite ends of state tables loving each other. Through schedules nobody challenged. "I am going to separate the engagement from the treaty," Solveig said. "It may fail. Good things fail." Her mother paused for breath. "Bad methods also succeed." That evening Solveig and Matteo faced the press together without the sapphire ring. Reporters shouted that the engagement was over. "Our private relationship is continuing," Matteo said. "Its status is not a condition of clean water, public finance, or sovereignty." She answered, "That question matters to us and should not determine anyone's vote." Markets fell, social media mourned. The Albion Council endorsed the plan unanimously. In the lift afterward, Matteo leaned against the mirrored wall. "Our romance has reduced bond value by 2%. At last, measurable intimacy." He laughed, and Solveig kissed him before the doors opened. Chapter 6 Ratification Day arrived without a wedding date. Belarive's parliament approved the revised treaty first. Norwin's vote remained uncertain. Voss had resigned after the ethics inquiry confirmed he authorized the leak, but his former coalition split over the elected Albion Assembly. Nationalists called it surrender. Promised marriage. Solveig's popularity fell 12 points and then stopped. She addressed Parliament from the public gallery, not the floor. Constitutional custom allowed the heir to attend but not lobby. Watched from Belarive through a secure video line. They had agreed not to speak until after the vote. Clause 21 added privately, neither would turn anxiety into pressure during the debate. Members quoted their leaked contract more often than the treaty. 1. Nationalist read Clause 10 aloud and asked whether a future queen who separated intimacy from succession understood monarchy at all. A younger member replied that citizens separated marriage from public office every day without causing the sea to rise. Laughter broke the chamber's tension. Solveig listened without expression while messages accumulated on her phone. Her mother sent a single period every hour. Their agreed signal. Absence, it was compliance with a promise that required effort. Iona addressed Parliament from the witness rail. She held up a bottle of brown water collected after the cyclone. "This treaty has been discussed as if two young people's affection creates our future. Our future is created by enforceable budgets, accountable representatives, and whether this bottle becomes safe to drink, bless their happiness if it comes. Do not invoice us for it." The undecided member who cast the final vote later said Iona changed his mind. Treaty passed by 1 vote. Solveig did not cheer. The island delegates did enough for everyone. She called Matteo, but his staff said he had left the palace. 6 hours later, he appeared at Norwin's Eastern Railway Station carrying one bag and no visible entourage. Protection officers emerged from the crowd after him, looking resentful. The agreement was to speak after the vote, he said. It did not specify a device. Solveig met him on the platform. You crossed 2 countries for a conversation? Bellariv is narrow. He took her to the small apartment the Norwin household had assigned him during the engagement. It contained government furniture, 6 ceremonial photographs, and a refrigerator holding olives, sparkling water, and 1 fossilized lemon. A compelling argument for union, Solveig said. Matteo set the sapphire ring on the kitchen table. She had returned it to his mother after the press conference. My mother says it was a loan, not a verdict. I want to marry you, he said. Not for ratification, not next month, perhaps not next year. I want to build toward the question without pretending I do not know my answer. Her instinct reached for conditions. Residences, reigns, children, 2 courts, the impossibility of both heirs. Becoming sovereign love could not solve the constitutional conflict. One of them might eventually have to renounce a throne, or both countries would need a new arrangement. I cannot promise which country I will live in, she said. Neither can I. I will become regent soon. No, our succession laws conflict. Then lawyers may finally earn what we pay them. She almost smiled. You use humor when trapped. I am in a kitchen with an ice auditor and a fossilized lemon. Conditions are severe. Solveig placed the ring on her finger. Acceptance of a wedding date. It is a ring, not a hostage note. And if our roles become incompatible, Matteo stepped close. Then we tell the truth before easier people tell it for us. She kissed him with the treaty finally absent from the room. They spent the night in the apartment. Privacy did not make intimacy effortless. Solveig was nervous, then irritated at being nervous. Matteo asked before every new touch until she accused him of conducting a customs inspection. They laughed, slowed down, and found a tenderness no clause could guarantee. Later, beneath government-issued sheets, they discussed which household leaked worse and whether the lemon qualified for diplomatic immunity. Minister turned to watch her remove the ring. Matteo slept on his stomach, one hand open beside her. She went to the kitchen and found his contract copy in the bin, torn in half but not destroyed. He joined her wearing a blanket around his shoulders. Dramatic disposal. The recycling rules are complex. Solveig spread the pages on the table. Their signatures remained at the bottom. I do not want to pretend the terms were meaningless, she said. They made it possible for us to begin, frightened. Perhaps we keep the boundaries and remove the deadline. They crossed out 6 months, initialed the change, and added the clause about anxiety. It was absurd to amend an agreement at 2 in the morning after sleeping together. Matteo made tea. Solveig taped the pages and placed them in her bag. In the morning, photographs showed them buying bread on the corner. The headline called it a secret night together. Solveig read it over coffee. Nothing involving 6 protection officers is secret, she said. Matteo spread jam on her toast, but it was ours. For once, that was enough. Chapter 7, 1 year later, the Albion desalination plant opened under the authority of an elected island assembly. Sana, the welder who built the emergency coupling, cut the ribbon. Solveig and Matteo stood in the second row. Queen Ingrid abdicated that spring after Parliament approved the transition. Solveig became Norwin's queen on a clear April morning, swearing to uphold the Constitution in a dark suit with no crown. Gallery beside island delegates. Bellariv's newspapers noted that he did not bow. Norwin's noted that Solveig smiled when she saw him. Their constitutional problem remained. Others' country or exercise influence there. A joint reign was unacceptable to both parliaments. Renunciation would alter succession for 6 months. Committees produced diagrams. Every hearing, At the final one, she asked why everyone assumed she could not succeed him. Bellariv's succession law allowed it. Tradition had simply kept Matteo first because nobody imagined an heir might prefer another life. Constitutional law chaired the Coastal Commission and possessed the alarming habit of reading budgets for pleasure. Matteo did not renounce immediately. He spent 3 months traveling Bellarive, speaking with parliament, regional councils, and people who had prepared their whole lives to see him crowned. Some called him selfish. Others called the crown stronger when inherited by willingness rather than inertia. The hardest conversation was with his mother. Dowager Queen Alessandra received him in the music room where his father's sailing trophies still occupied a cabinet. She had encouraged Lucia's education, but never imagined it would replace Matteo's future. "You were born first," she said, as if birth order contained an argument. "Family. Then perhaps the family can survive learning there were 8. Alessandra accused Solveig of taking him. Matteo stopped her before the sentence became permanent. "Solveig asked me not to renounce for her." His mother cried. Matteo sat beside her without withdrawing his decision or calling her grief manipulation. By evening, she asked to see Lucia's transition plan. Consent did not always arrive before pain. Retirement in September. Lucia became heir. The decision was not a romantic sacrifice. Solveig refused that language in every interview. Matteo had chosen the public work he wanted. Maritime climate adaptation across the Albion region. Place in succession. Bellarive gained an heir who had asked for the job. Their wedding took place in the fisherman's hostel on Marrow Island. There were 40 guests, unreliable heating, and one fisherman who asked about llamas during the vows. Island civil law. Solveig wore the sapphire ring and a plain blue dress. Matteo forgot the written vows in his coat and spoke without them. "I cannot promise permanence as proof of goodness," he said. "I promise that when change comes, I will not let fear speak in your name." Solveig had drafted her vows, revised them, and reduced them to 3 sentences. "I spent my life believing love became safe when every term was known. You taught me that safety is not certainty. It is the freedom to answer honestly and be asked again." Outside, no government. Banners flew. Norwin, Bellarive, and Albion flags hung together at the harbor because local children had put them there. At dinner, the chef served lentil stew in memory of the landslide night. Matteo accused Solveig of counting cards, had invented 3 rules. The Queen of Norwin and the former heir of Bellarive argued until Iona confiscated the deck. Later, they walked to the desalination plant. Its lights shone across the dark water. Unremarkable, now that it worked. "Do you miss it?" Solveig asked. "The throne, the future everyone knew for you," Matteo considered. "I miss not having to explain. Explanation is exhausting." She understood. He took her hand. "Do you regret marrying a decorative opportunist?" "Frequently. Your contract compliance is poor. Clause 10 was particularly disappointing." She laughed into his shoulder. They divided their time between Norwin and the islands. Represented Bellarive in Norwin policy. Solveig never sat on the Albion project board. Boundaries required maintenance, not faith. Once a week, except during state emergencies, they ate dinner without staff for at least 90 minutes. Governments. Sometimes they argued about wet towels. Sometimes they sat in the same room and said very little. Their first serious married argument concerned a port project Matteo publicly supported. Overstated, a newspaper accused Solveig of blocking her husband's work. Another accused Matteo of using her position. They spoke through official channels for 4 days and privately only about meals. "Prove the critics right." Matteo answered, "I am afraid avoiding it will prove the marriage false." They reviewed the science together without trying to reach one conclusion. Matteo revised. The port improved. At their next weekly dinner, Matteo served a lemon tart made from fruit that had not fossilized. Solveig declared it excessive symbolism and ate 2 slices. The original engagement contract remained in the Council of Crowns archive, famous for its leaked clauses and red corrections. On the final page, beneath the signatures, Matteo later wrote an amendment by hand. No private love shall serve as public collateral. Solveig added a second line. All terms remain subject to honest renegotiation. Neither sentence had legal force. That was why both mattered.